This is the infamous, well, I wouldn't say infamous, but it's like the most recent Ian Hazzikostas interview, and also something that should be pretty relevant to a lot of people who are doing high-end game content, which is pretty much where I kind of put myself in. I'm more of that category than the other weird stuff they do in the world. I'm not even going to read the comments. It's a pretty long video, so I want to just react fully to it, start to finish. And we'll see, maybe I'll divide the video in two if there's like a need for it, but like if it goes smoothly, then there's won't be need for it anyway. I'll stop delaying and let's go. Limit Max interviewing Ian Hazzikostas. Let's go.
We are here live with Ian. First time we're actually meeting. I don't think we've ever actually spoken before. I know you mentioned in a couple of their interviews you had seen some of my videos and talked about it, like the AMZ thing, which was pretty funny.
Yep. Long time
the AMZ, oh god, the AMZ thing was fucking hilarious. So it's like they nerfed AMZ, and that was such a big problem because DKs basically became kind of like a lot less useful, but they still had the grip, so you still need to bring DKs, but you couldn't use the raid buff kind of thing, which like reduces all damage by like 10 or 20%.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the changes we wanted to make, so I appreciate it.
Okay, all right. Well, okay, they're going to be mad about that, but that's fine. Okay, but yeah, so I just want to get right into it because we have like a pretty limited amount of time. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is actually Season 4. So I think, first of all, the community loves it. At best, I think it's a great new idea that can, revolutionize the end of expansion's gameplay. Very worse, honestly, is just objectively better than a super long Season 3. So basically, what are some of your thoughts about Season 4? And if you've had any time during Dragonflight to think about maybe if it could be brought back or improved upon.
So the difference between Season 4 and like regular season, they took only 4 dungeons from Shadowlands and 4 dungeons from previous expansions and made them into Mythic Pluses. Overall, I think it's a good idea, but I hope it changes often enough for people to not get stale. And this would also like help them later on because, and I know they're doing for Dragonflight where they only have 4 Dragonflight dungeons and 4 dungeons from previous expansions, which would make it more interesting to do Mythic Pluses throughout the patches. Right now, the biggest problem with Mythic Pluses is that you're doing the same 8 Mythic Pluses throughout the 2 years, so it's like you kind of get bored of doing them. So this would be a very good idea overall.
Yeah, thank you for those thoughts, those reactions. I think it's been overall super happy with how it's played out. Definitely, some bumps the first week, especially with scaling issues. We never really used that tech.
It is what it is. Yeah, before. I mean, I don't think anyone expected it to be perfect. Obviously, especially like you get some dungeons that are like substantially harder than others, and good luck scaling them properly. For not only because like before it was like level 110, 120s for like Mechagon 120, Akara was 110, and to scale them properly for a level 60 character, it's definitely going to be errors. It is what it is.
So we had to work out some kinks in the system there. But I think we went into this hoping that it would play out well.
I'm not saying this like as a cop-out. It's like, well, it's understandable. It's like, yeah, they should have internal testing stuff with that, but it's like they're not going to hit the mark right away. It's like there's not going to be enough testing per dungeon that they've ever done. It's like, imagine like you have at minimum 8 dungeons per expansion, right? And you're throwing in dungeons from Mists, I believe they want to do, WoD, Legion, and BFA. That's at least 32 dungeons. Like, they're not going to be able to test all of them before they release them. Like, it's not realistic.
Boy, it had. And if it did, that this could become something that we go to in the future at the very end of the expansion. Just kind of in those last few months, everyone knows the next expansion's on the horizon. You finish the story, you finish the current expansion's content. It's just kind of a remix and a chance to revisit kind of the greatest hits of the expansion as a whole.
Yeah.
Tuning has been definitely...
Given that it is going to be the greatest hits, obviously, and not just like most hated dungeons like Cohen.
Something we've been looking at. Like I think now that people have more gear, pretty happy with where that's landed. And we definitely heard a lot of feedback, especially the first couple of weeks, from like Hall of Fame and Cutting Edge, but not guilds like your guild, that it felt too much like reprogression. And it's like we go look at logs and realize like, look, you guys wiped like 5 times, then killed the boss. Like that's not really progression, but I get it, right? Like it feels like you've already learned this fight. It feels like you've already killed the boss. You expect to just go and win. But we want it to be a little bit of a challenge. So I think overall it's played out pretty much what we wanted to.
All right, great, yeah, and some other things that were added during Season 4 outside the actual gameplay element of faded affixes and raids were a lot of the like loot acquisition systems. So you had to create a few new unique ones because of the way the raids would be rotating. But I kind of wanted to ask you about them. So like Dinar and the upgrade essences from Heroic and Mythic.
Oh, this is about the. Sorry, I was talking about the dungeons. This is about the raids. Overall, I'm not against it. I don't know if it should compete with current raid tier though, or like in order to unlock. I don't know. I don't know how it should go loot-wise as far as like old raids Mythic compared to like current raid Mythic. I still think they should be easier than current raid Mythic, because like current raid Mythic is the the challenge of the expansion, right? The biggest challenge of current raid mythic is learning the fight, not so much like just out DPSing or whatever. It's literally like the mechanics. If the old raids that release in the expansion can give you the same gear as the current raid, I don't know how I feel about that too much. Like, in one point, I'm like, who cares? It's just gear. But on another point, it's like it reduces the prestige of doing current raid mythic kind of thing, right? Also, you would have a lot less time to do current raid mythic compared to the other mythics. So it's like, for example, let's say you had 4 raids, right, in an expansion. Let's, just to make it easier to calculate, you have 4 raids in an expansion. Each raid is half a year. So that means on the last raid release, you can do the previous raid. So technically, you're gonna have at most a year of doing previous raids, but only half a year for the most current raid. So that doesn't feel too good as well.
I think they're excellent. Is there a chance that we could actually see a truncated version of this in a regular season that would maybe help with loot targeting? So an idea for that is like currently someone could do an entire Mythic Sanctum raid every week and never see a Japhis maybe. Yep. It obviously would have to be much less, but like what could that look like?
I think something like this for sure. I think kind of like the season, the season structure itself, we see this as a time for experimentation, and experiments aren't necessarily going to be carried forward in their exact form. But the idea of like...
This is kind of what I also hate, but I also agree with. I do think the last patch of the expansion should be to an extent experimentation for the next one to like implement cool stuff that can move forward. But the problem is, I feel like every patch should have a little experiment going on, and to see if something works or doesn't, to see if people like it or not. For example, my opinion, corruption was a great experiment. The only problem is, why didn't they keep it, right? Like, why didn't they use that corruption type thing into the next expansion, right? Because I think everyone loved corruption, but where is it, right? It's like corruption was a fantastic experiment. Didn't like the acquisition, but like as far as effects went, fucking fantastic. And they didn't really do anything with it, which really, really sucks.
Type RNG backstops and some feeling.
Oh, and the reason that this is why I agree with it. The reason I don't agree with it is because they make the last patch such a big experiment that's like, you don't feel like it feels like everything before that was kind of like shit, and now the fun experiment is out, so it's like everyone wants to participate. I don't know, it's like, it's the contrast really that I hate. That's why I'm saying like every patch should have a little experiment going on, right?
Being guaranteed that you will eventually get that chase specimen slot item you want feels like a useful thing for us to explore. I mean, the NAR system, I think, in terms of how upfront it is and how quickly you're getting some things, that is probably way more accelerated than we would ever do in a regular news season.
I don't know why. There's no reason not to. Again, like this whole, like I'll make a video about it later, but it's like they're putting their loot on such a pedestal. It's like, this is gear that doesn't stay with you. This is gear that will go away. Also, damn, Arthas looks fucking good in that fucking full-on armor set and Frostmourne. But yeah, it's like, everyone knows this gear is going away, man. Just like let people have the gear, because then they can try other shit. I don't know why they're trying so hard.
There's a couple reasons for that. One is like the 3-week rotation means that you just get fewer shots.
Yep.
These items.
Yep.
Also, like psychologically, most of these are items that you already had. Like, it's while it was relevant, you got your Japhis, you got your Salon Daggers, whatever else. So you have to re-earn them. I think it would, to some extent, I think more than some extent, I think it would diminish the feeling of chasing after that like real trophy item if just week 3 or week 4 of a brand new tier, maybe even before you like kill the boss that dropped it on a specific difficulty.
I know why. Like, for example, take the corruption system. This is like out of nowhere, right? Take the corruption system. What you could have done is implement corruption type thing into your what's it called? Instead of like corruption, say infuse gear with a certain corruption, right? Or a certain enchantment that you can get, but you can only like maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 at a time. Let's say for your the usual helm, chest, and legs, you can infuse them with something you unlocked, but only one of each, right?
Everyone just walk in and get their item. But yeah, like ups and downs, and being excited about a loot jackpot has value, but feeling like you could do all the right things but never get it is definitely a bummer. Let's see what we can do about that going forward.
Sweet, yeah. And I think also you're going to...
What I mean, what can you do moving forward? Valor points or whatever, like make the bosses drop currency. With the currency, you can buy the item that you want and upgrade it to to the level that you're able to clear, right? Like, if you're clearing, each boss drops a mythic boss will drop a token. With a token, you can upgrade the heroic gear to that mythic version. But the only way to upgrade from heroic to mythic is you have to actually kill the mythic boss, right? Like, let's say you need to kill the boss 4 times, you didn't get the loot, you can use the token to upgrade the heroic item, whatever, and you can buy the heroic item with, like, let's say, valor points.
Kind of have a little bit of that reintegrated into every season going forward as well, with like
or normal,
plus, right?
or
like
whatever.
You're doing a bunch
normal,
of plus dungeons.
probably.
You're also going to see a bunch of new, potentially best in slaughter, very interesting trinkets and things to try. So you're going to have a lot of more loot to kind of go around. Okay, so another thing that's
Can't experiment.
I just want to talk to you about like current raid accessibility in WoW. So I've heard you speak a lot about, like people always ask about 10 mans and stuff, and I think I actually really agree with like 20 mans in WoW with how many specs there are and how vast and variable the different types of combat styles.
I saw the max video. Right now you can't even make it 10 man just because of how your roster needs to look like in a 20 man. It's like you have 13 slots that are always taken by certain classes, like you can't do anything about it.
And also the ways that specs deal with that exist. I think 20 man is excellent, but I think there are a lot of things in the game where maybe the barrier of entry could be questioned at that point. So I think the first one I would want to talk about is actually the Mythic Raid lockout currently. So I think this exists where a lot of guilds, let's just say they want to do prototype Pantheon, and they're looking, there's a guild raid, they don't want to cancel the raid, they need 2 people. Well, it's going to be really hard for someone to sign up for that group maybe if they really want loot from Skolex and Vigilant Guardian, and I don't want to get myself locked into this group's raid if I'm not going to continue or if we don't kill it.
Yeah, the raid ID thing needs to go away for Mythic. If they don't have it in Heroic, it shouldn't be in Mythic either. It's like, there's no reason not to be able to bring a random into your Mythic raid, and not have him be on like a fucked up lockup for his own raid. So it's like your pool of players at the end of the week, honestly, even at the beginning of the week, if someone knows is going to raid Mythic on a Thursday, on a Tuesday you're missing 1 player and you want to bring it, like a lot of people would be like, well, listen, I don't want to lock myself into Mythic because I have my own Mythic raid on a Thursday, so I can't even come and help you out or practice.
Basically what I'm asking is, do you think maybe the Mythic lockout is outdated in
raid
2022
ID.
and it would maybe help a thriving pug system of more raids being able to happen at the 20-man raid size?
So what I'm hearing is you want to do more splits, Mythic splits, more mount sales.
Now, this is something that always gets brought up to me, that this would honestly be something I dread about it, but I honestly think...
This has nothing to do with the splits, though. I mean, I see spawn, but it's like, no, like you're still saved for the boss if you kill it. It doesn't matter, but you can at least get the practice on, right? Without, like, and if accidentally you kill the boss, you don't get, like, you locked for the gear, but you're not locked for the raid, right? Just raid ID.
Stuff that is a side effect where what we do is more crazy, that sounds miserable. I think it could be potentially much better for a lot of other people in the game.
Yeah.
So it could be. So I think when you talk about pugs, for sure, the rigid lockout system for Mythic is inconvenient for pugs.
Yep.
I think at its core, Mythic raid difficulty isn't really meant for pugs. People will pug it later on in the season for sure, especially on bigger servers. Certainly, in season 4 like this, where the fights are much better known, tuning's more forgiving, sure. But it's one of those things where, like, the lockout is an example of a little bit of healthy friction. We talk about, friction that can have social benefits, like stuff that was removed when we added raid time back in the day. This is one of those examples in that joining a Mythic raid is a little bit of commitment. And I could argue that there's an upside for pugs as well, which is that...
Hair went a bit crazy there.
If you're doing a Mythic Mathria pug, kill Shriekewing, and then suddenly, things aren't going great on Altamore, it's a great reason not to bail on that group. It's a great reason to not have a quarter of the group say, nah, these guys don't get it, I'm out and find another group, because you're locked for the week. You're together with them.
Like, I get his argument, but it's like, it fucks more players than it helps. Also, what he just said would still happen, and that one person just fucked up 19 other people because of the lockout.
You have to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that actually encourages somewhat stronger social bonds, reliance on others. At the same time, I get it if you just want to jump in and get one boss, but I think the downsides to the overall Mythic ecosystem, if we just remove that lockout and made them flex, would outweigh the upsides. And there's a reason like normal and heroic are designed to be much...
I don't care about the flex. It's just a raid ID.
Much more inherently flexible in structure.
Just the raid ID.
That's why those work that way. That's why Mythic still works the old way.
Okay, cool. So no plans to change that. And yeah, the split thing would definitely be a very unintended side effect from that. Like the absolute terror of potentially seeing like Scott message and be like, okay, everyone show up tomorrow. We're going to be boosting Mythic Jailer for like 12 hours or something. I mean, oh my lord, would that be bad? Okay, so I agree with that. Another thing, just along the lines of accessibility. So in VFA, you guys came out with the Hall of Fame with the whole like Horde versus Alliance thing in that expansion, and it became the trigger for cross realm being available. So the game has seen multiple additions recently to make the game more accessible. So cross faction being a major one, and then also with the region wide auction house. Is there any possibility we could get cross realm at the beginning or earlier in the season in Dragonflight now that the Hall of Fame is less relevant?
Yeah, I think it's like I don't think we're likely to right from the very beginning that we're moving in that direction. We did it for Sepulchre before the Hall of Fame was full. I think it's likely we're going to repeat that again for Vault going forward. In general, the game as a whole, I think, is moving at tearing down server boundaries. We want to make more and more things cross server. I think we recognize
it is going in the direction, and it's like everyone knows it's going to happen. Just fucking make it happen. You already lost like 50% of player base, man. Just like let the 25% from each faction just fucking play together. And also, like, the whole faction thing doesn't make sense when it comes to PvE, and also like there's no reason to like lock it between realms. And but again, to do that, you have to remove this. Like, I think you have to remove the mythic raid ID, like how it is.
it's like 15 years ago, back in Classic. If you log into Classic today, you have the strength of sort of insular, self-contained communities where you're seeing the same people over and over again, and there's a lot of upsides.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in retail.
Downsides to some of these restrictions. I think in the modern game, really, server increasingly feels like restrictions without as much upside, and so we are systematically working at chipping away at all of those divisions. It just takes time. So I think when we get to a point where things like potentially cross-server guilds down the line and so forth are on the table, I think fully cross-server raids from the start will be automatic. But for now, we want to while we're working towards it, we want to make sure we're not pulling the rug out from our existing social structures. And so earlier, but not day one.
Okay, great.
And then mythic.
So, and again, just the last two more questions basically about raid accessibility. And the main one would be actually talking about something you guys have previously done with cross-faction. I think largely this has been really, really good for the game. Obviously, there's still a few things, like it's a little clunky to invite sometimes cross-faction. And then also there's some situations currently like raid lockouts. Like if you were to race change previously, like let's say for Skolex, you want to go be Dwarf in your alliance, and that's already fine. Now it's perfectly realistic for you to be able to race change maybe Blood Elf and still raid with your guild, but it will like break your mythic lockout. So I think something that can solve this, and something you guys have spoken on before, is basically, is there any progress being made to the technical limitation of cross-faction guilds? Is it something maybe mid-expansion or much longer than that, do you think?
There's definitely progress being made. It's something we want to do. It's not really responsible for me to commit to a time frame. I would say I would like us to do it before the next expansion.
Okay.
But it's in the hands of a lot of engineering problem solving and just a lot of these
like stuff like that I can fault them for. But like yeah, I can't blame them for like the cross faction stuff. Like it is engineering thing, but like, and it's like as long as they're working on it, that's fine. It will take time. I hope it doesn't take them so long that it's like people can't play. But yeah, I think the biggest issue with aside from gearing, the biggest accessibility for mythic raiding is lockout ID.
Changes are pulling on a thread in code and systems that have been built to work a certain way for 20 years, and realizing like, hey, this is trickier than we expected. It may be easier than we expected. We'll see. But definitely recognize there's some awkwardness as some groups have had people faction change that want to keep raiding together, and not being able to share the same guild chat, the same guild repairs, guild bank, etc., guild achievements gets in the way.
I mean, but I feel like the community solves that as far as like conversation goes. Like your guild chat can just make a guild community, so it's like people who are like playing on other realms and other characters, other factions. They can just be in the same community, so you can still contact the people in your guild.
A lot of the other stuff you talked about, I think a lot of those are what I would consider bugs. There's a few that we're working on tracking down specifically with cross-faction whispers or invites. If you're in a group with somebody, if you've applied to the group, find a group, if you're trying to reply to a message, like all of that should just work. Anytime it fails to work, that's a bug. Now, the thing we want to make sure is that there's some opt-in connection. You're not just getting a whisper from a random cross-faction person that ganked you in the afterworld or whatever. And then also similarly, I think faction change, that's something we need to change. Like the fact that it stops your lockout is a vestige of how the system was built, when of course two people of opposite factions couldn't be in the same raid in the same lockout. We just nuked your old one to avoid that collision. We shouldn't be doing that now, but again, that's an example of an old system that needs to be updated.
Sweet. Okay. All right, so this is a big one, and this is again, I've heard your philosophy on this multiple times. The WoW has gone through a very long history of going back and forth between bring the player or the class. So last expansion, playing perfectly optimally, there was about 7 spots in a 20-man raid that were basically required with something that you could not really replace with any other class. This expansion,
I would say 13, really. Oh, you said previous.
So far, again, taking a few liberties, but even leaving a few out, there's a bit closer to 12. Speaking for a not world first or high level cutting edge team who will probably make it work regardless, but more for the 10 to 15 man AOTC level teams that might not have some very powerful buffs, or might have to swap classes and like play something they maybe don't like as much to make themselves more powerful. I understand a lot of people don't need to be fully optimal, but yeah. Basically, can you explain your philosophy around raid buffs and how it's different from X-Back to X-Back, where some classes were not required and now might be?
Yeah, so okay. Let me make sure I have.
That was a long question. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, okay. So like, I mean, so some of the stuff you've mentioned that I've talked about in the past, but I'm thinking the origins of bring the player, not the class, were like the extreme other end of the spectrum back in late Burning Crusade, where it wasn't just raid buffs, it was a matrix of party buffs, and it was as people saw in BC raiding, well, you need a rogue in the group with a warrior to get battle shot, the warrior needs Wind Fury or they're bad, and sometimes you have somebody who's a good player, who plays a class that's theoretically good, but you don't have room for them in your specific.
You still have that though. So for example, right now, like a lot of the melee champions need to be want to be in an enhancement group, like with an enhancement shaman, or like with a shaman overall to get Wind Fury buff. The ones who benefit from haste the most. which is like also makes, like, for example, Red Paladin's like low on that list, so that sucks. PI buff was going for DKs instead of Red Paladin, right? It's like I obviously I come from a Red Paladin background, so it's like I'm going to say what the detriment of that as far as someone who doesn't receive these buffs, right? It's like, who has a buff up now? I have PI. It's like, okay, it's like, well, you have a DK and you have a Red Paladin. One has wings, the other one has like all of his cooldowns. Like, okay, well, listen, the DK is gonna get it like 99% of the time, right? I got it a few times, but it's like it sucks. When you don't get it, even though like when you get it, it's like it's not that big of an increase, to be honest. So like stuff like that, like PI, Shaman, Wind Fury, shit like that, and also like I think like all plates should bring the same utility, all leather should bring the same utility, all mail should bring the same utility, all cloth should be, all healers should bring the same utility, and all casters should bring the same utility, right? So, like, for example, if you have a plate, but he's a healer, like a Red Paladin, for example, you're not going to bring the utility of a Warrior or a DK who are DPS, but the Red Paladin should bring the utility that the other ones bring. So then you have more freedom to get them, right? To get the utilities that the other classes bring. And by utilities, I don't mean like necessarily like it's more of a movement speed increase. So, for example, Druid Roar, which gives movement speed to everyone. I think what's it called? Rogue should have something similar, right? Monk should have something similar that brings that utility. And also, it doesn't have to be as potent, but it has to be similar, right? So it's like, say, Druid increases 20%, Rogue increases by 15%. It's not that big of a deal. 15% movement speed versus 20%, it's enough, right? So it's like, if you min-max, you bring the Druid, but if you don't, like, you can bring the Rogue, right? Same with like DK grip, right? Warrior can throw a chain to pull someone in. Paladin can do something with the light, I don't know, whatever. But like, yeah.
Raid party matrix, and so they can't contribute. That felt clearly not what we wanted. And we moved away from that steadily. But I think
just make professions do those things. Warlock Gate, for example, which is extremely useful in so many fights. It's just such a great tool. Make a profession do it, like engineers create warp gates, you know.
What we're moving back towards is class mattering, making sure that the best raid composition, if you want to be optimal, is one that has representation of all 12, soon to be all 13 classes.
Well, you're not going to have.
And that's, 20-player Mythic Raid format supports that. I think that's something that is friendly for pugs as well.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't support that. Some classes you can get away with one, but like, for example, most times you'd rather have multiple of the same class to give twice the buff. For example, having 2 Demon Hunters, if Demon Hunter is doing decent DPS, having 2 different Darkness cooldowns is fucking massive, right? Before it was like 2 DKs, having 2 different AMZs was fucking massive, right? It's like, why would I bring a DK and a Paladin when I can have 2 DKs? It's like, that doesn't make sense. So it's more than just bringing the one, right? Sometimes you're going to bring multiples of the same one because it's like you can overlap. Yeah, it's like, let's say you have 2 big mechanics that you need, and it's like the one cooldown is not enough, so you can have 2 of the same character bring 2 cooldowns, right? So
flex raid setting.
I don't fuck, man. I need to slow down my speech because I am talking almost as fast as the 1.5 speed video. So yeah, sorry about that. It's just I don't think about it. It's just like you start fucking talking as fast as you hear it.
Or you're trying to recruit the optimal group, get a group together. If you don't have a warlock, you should be looking for a warlock. If you don't have a hunter, you should be looking for a hunter.
If you don't have a warlock, maybe engineers can make the gate as well. You know.
As opposed to, which is the meta range spec, this tier, let me just bring 5 of them and we're good to go. That helps provide.
Same with like, let's say their hunter has traps, like obviously like you don't really need them, but for example, like actually, yeah, some bosses, like you need a hunter for a freeze trap, right? Blacksmiths should also be able to put down traps, or engineers again. Like engineer, I mean, fucking can do everything, but yeah.
Social opportunities for the full range of players. Now, that said, we want to make sure that none of these buffs feels too impactful to the point that it's like, you can't go without it. It's utterly mandatory at multiple levels of play, not just, the top tier level.
Tell me, how do you do in Shadowlands? Because this is when I quit in Chains of Domination, right? Or Sanctum of Domination. How do you do the second boss, the Eye, where you don't have 2 warlocks for 2 separate gates? You can do it, but it just trivializes the fight so much.
In that case, we want to look at things like tuning, we want to look at things like alternate buff items that can provide a substitute. Or
Heck,
just
even
increasing
one
availability.
warlock.
I think the two most classic ones in this space are, Bloodlust, Battle Res. I think no group at almost any level is going to go without them. The percentage of classes that raise those buffs has decreased naturally over the years. That's something we're looking at changing. So a little scoop for you. I think
Percentage? Okay, yeah, the percentage decreased because you added more classes, but like, who has Beerus? Druid and Death Knight? Basically. I think all the healers should have a Beerus at this point, to be honest. Like, I mean, they can all resurrect, might as well have them all be able to do a battle res. You're telling me a priest shouldn't be able to do a battle res? Doesn't make sense.
you'll probably see this in the next beta build, or next alpha build rather. Evokers will bring Bloodlust, so we'll have a fourth Lust class in the mix. We're also looking at adding Battle Res to one more class, possibly Paladins.
I don't know why warriors don't have Bloodlust, to be honest. It fits them so well. Like, it just fits the character, the class fantasy to have Bloodlust. Just fucking a war cry, basically. All it is.
Likely Paladins, but don't 100% quote me on that.
Blood cry.
Yep. And then for the rest, like, we want to take a step back and look at the whole ecosystem now that we've explored the space of individual buffs. Like on the class level, we don't want to close that door and say, no, we're not doing this. But it's absolutely possible that when you take all 38 specs in their totality, there's just too much of this now. We're too close to the Burning Crusade space. At which point, over the next month, we'll want to pull back on some of those.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. So actually, I will.
Just mix and match, man, honestly. Just do similar to what do you call it? Do similar to what Final Fantasy does. All tanks bring the same utility pretty much. What do you call it? All the all the healers bring pretty much everything, all the same stuff, right? So it's like, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't do that.
I have a follow-up question on that.
But again, technically also, like, Final Fantasy Red Mage is a res mage, really, instead, and then all the other mages can't really do it. Maybe Summoner can res, but like, that's a once in a while. But like, Red Mage, not only can he res, he just like fucking every second cast is an instant res. So he does bring that as like a fucking amazing utility, and it's like, you really like Red Mages on progress.
First of all, that was an amazing answer. Thank you for that. But so when you talk about like a scenario where, okay, if you are trying to play optimally, you maybe will want to have one of every spec. I think there's a couple of polarizing versions of raid utility right now that I kind of want to hear your opinion on.
Yeah.
So currently, I think of how many classes are there now? Is it 13 with Evokers?
Yep.
Okay. With 13 classes, I think 10 have ones where they have either an hour-long raid buff that is basically irreplaceable, or are in some way bringing them to raid. Like, for example, Warlocks don't have them, but if you've been around Gateways, Hellstones, Summons, Wipe Recovery, all those things are extremely powerful, and you need one of those classes. How do you look at abilities like DK's Death Grip, where it's not a class you need to have in the raid every pull, but if there is a raid boss or a dungeon or something that requires grips, that is as important or more important than that. So how do you balance between classes that just have a button that puts them in the raid versus classes that have such strong situational utility where they're needed immensely for small things, but not for every boss?
Yeah, not gonna
nerf that grip, in other words. No,
that's the opposite of what I'm saying.
No,
yeah.
You don't have to nerf death grip. What you can do is make the bosses like that you can't grip shit in there, and there you go. You nerf. It's like, there you go, right? I mean, technically it's a nerf for death grip, but it's like, if there are no mobs to death grip, then you don't death grip, kind of thing.
Honestly, carefully. Like, needed is the thing that shouldn't be something that we're building in encounters, certainly on non-mythic difficulties.
Yeah. Like,
if having knockbacks, having death grip, having a certain tool makes your life a bit easier in normal and heroic, great. And again, like, pug leaders especially, like, pug leaders are encouraged to, it's flex rate for a reason. Look for a Death Knight. There's a ton out there who are actively looking for groups. Get one in, it'll help you. Philosophically, like, we have normal versus heroic. I think part of the difference there, like, a normal group.
Why gate mythic only behind those who will change class or spec, though? Why can't I play the class that I love, basically?
Normal mode is pugs, but also just really casual friends and family groups. They're just there to play with each other. They're not looking to bring strangers into their group. They're not necessarily looking to, like, recruit to get a certain class or re-roll. We want to make sure that that difficulty, you can succeed regardless. You can succeed with a very suboptimal comp as long as you have the basics covered. At heroic level, like, to some extent, the difference there, even if you're not like cutting edge mythic, there's some challenge, there's some coordination. You care about success. You're not going to bring along a person who's doing 50% less damage than everybody else if you're failing to meet a DPS check. And so in that space, bringing in classes that can help you is useful. If it's ever literally impossible, then we're going to probably make mechanical changes to the encounter. We're going to give you more time. We're going to, make a cast interruptible. We'll do something there, so it's like, it's not just ridiculously punishing.
I missed that comment, but it was basically enemy displacement or something.
Yeah, give you more time. We're going to,
Enemy displacement is really fun and feels giga strong. He's damn right.
Make a cast interruptible. We'll do something there, so it's like, it's not just ridiculously punishing if you don't have that specific class. Honestly, though, like, things like Death Grip, we would like more of those.
Not that it's punishing to not bring it, just makes... Well, I mean, I guess it is if you put in perspective, but it's like, it's too rewarding to have that versus not having it. That's the only thing. Kel'Thuzad without Death Knight is a pain in the ass, for example.
Because it's so cool. Because it's more than just 5% damage or whatever passive buff. It lets you shape your strategy.
Leap of Faith increased.
Even though they may, Rosette having to run out and do some utility at the expense of their parts here or there, it lets them feel like they have a special role that's contributing to the group's success.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. Also, just because chat's definitely like these DKs are wild, but yeah, I was more kind of along the lines of like implying like I think it's hunters, DKs, and shamans, I believe, that are the only class in the game basically that has situational fight utility instead of just they have something that makes them in all the time. So I was kind of just saying like maybe if you did actually want where like okay you will always have at least one of these, so you have 7 spots now to fill with just what you.
Also, a lot of times, having the grip increases the DPS. It's not like because you're gripping, your DPS is lower. Gripping actually increases your DPS because you're bringing a mob towards the boss so you can cleave it off the boss. So you're increasing everyone's DPS in that moment as well. So technically,
you want if you're being optimal. Obviously, you don't have to be. If you're being optimal, and then you have that. Currently, there are. I think it's only you're kind of trending in this direction. So maybe we haven't seen the full vision of it, but like there is still I think like 2 or 3 classes that don't have something that puts them in the raid all the time.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, we are looking at representation across what the actual stats are. We want to have a good idea.
Who else? But Paladin's like the only one who don't really need at any point ever. Is there anyone else? You need rogues for soaks usually. You don't really need rogue like a lot of other people can suck. So I guess rogue and paladin maybe.
Something we feel is a good idea, something that's elegant, that's not, it's easy to say, okay, this class has nothing, they get some new passive 3% stat buff, now everyone has to. But that feels like a cop-out, so it's like, if there's a representation problem that we need to solve, and we're coming up with a good idea, we want to move in that general direction, but, not at the expense of elegant design.
Excellent. And actually, this actually isn't even a question. I just wanted to bring something up on the note of like bringing classes to raids to make sure it's accessible. Along something that's often forgot about when talking about the DK thing we talked about at the beginning of this interview, where it was the video you were watching was not about DKs, it was about melee representation in raids. And I want to say since that video, you guys have actually done a very good job at that. This expansion so far, Sanctum and Sepulchre, as opposed to like the normal comp, you've been able to stack basically as much melee in both of those raids on every boss.
Okay, being able to stack melee doesn't mean that you prefer melee. You can just do it, but you can just have more hunters. You don't like. It's not like there's a benefit to bring more melee. There's like specific bosses that probably you do have a benefit, but anything a melee can do, you can get from a ranged attacker. You can get from a hunter for the most part, and like some instant cast, like maybe arcane mages and stuff like that, like where it's like. Sorry, frost mages. They have like mostly instant cast, not so much castables. So it's like you don't really need melee, but it's like it's not punishing to have melee. And that's, I think, a big differentiation. Just because it's not punishing to bring melee doesn't mean you actually want more melee. Right? You can easily just go for more ranged classes. The only thing is right now, because you need certain melees, you need warriors, you need you need DKs, and you need demon hunters, you need monks. Right? 2 of them can be tanks. Well, all 4 of them can be tanks, but 2 of them can be tanks, and then it's like you only need the other 2, right? It's just like
as much as possible, and that has not happened before previously in WoW. So whatever adjustments you guys made there, it didn't actually trivialize melee, which was my fear for it, and it did make them more accessible. So just
cool. Thank you, and yeah, kudos to the encounter team. Really, I mean, it's something we talked about as an active goal. Like, how can we get ideal raid representation, melee versus range balance, better representing our actual class mix, and do that without, like you said, just making the fights patchwork for melee. Because that was like the traditional way back in the day of like, all right, these mechanics just don't target melee. Cool, they can just stand there and punch the boss for 5 minutes, but that's not a good experience for them either.
Yeah, and then just one more last thing before we move on to Mythic Plus. So you did mention something about, if you need to, you would potentially add them back. But just to specifically ask so if you feel like it's hard enough to get certain things in the game, you guys are not opposed to potentially bringing back the scrolls that existed in BFA, or potentially maybe not buffing Lustrums back what they are, because you just added another class that brings it, right?
I think we're open to it. I think part of the challenge there is also when you think about where the scrolls are used, not just a raid consumable, they become a mandatory consumable for every dungeon situation where by definition you're not going to have class representation because you can't.
Just make them work on in raid. The scrolls he's talking about is something like Fortitude. I think they had in Wrath. So it's like you didn't have to bring a priest, you could just bring the scroll of Fortitude, and then it's just as good. Stuff like that. I feel like that is actually a good solution, but again, just make it not work in dungeons. Make it just only in raid environments, and you kind of solve the problem. Like, I don't think that's a very hard coding. They already had things like that before, so.
And then it also starts to turn into like, well, wait, so the thing that I bring as a warrior, as a druid, whatever, is like a 2% better version of this buff where people don't have to spend gold.
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Like, that just makes their contribution feel less cool. So ideally, we would want to find a middle ground, whether maybe that's reducing the baseline power or otherwise tuning, so that it just still feels like, cool, we have this class, this is a benefit that we have, and the difference between having it and not isn't something that you can't overcome otherwise.
Okay, and just one more note that it just popped up to me: the this expansion Shadowlands, as opposed to before, you actually regard
like it being 2% more would also mean that like you don't need to use the consumable, right? It's not even that it's like, oh well, it's not as powerful because whatever. Good, first of all, good. It doesn't need to be that powerful, first of all, and second of all, you bring the warrior means you won't, or the priest means you won't need to use a consumable, means you're saving gold. Like I don't think that's that big of an issue.
You have consumables you use at like the beginning of a dungeon or beginning of a raid fight that is actually in a much higher number than you did previously. So you have like the armor kits, you have the sharpening stones, the oils, that kind of stuff. Do you guys see that continuing into Dragonflight?
That's a good question. I think we've probably gone a bit too far there. And I think as we're nailing down, finalizing professions for Dragonflight, I don't
think there was a need, like one or the other. You didn't have to have both. I don't think you needed the armor kit. The armor kit was extra. The weapon oils and stuff like that, I think it's cool flavor. Also, it makes sense. The armor kit doesn't really make as much sense, but like the weapon oil or sharpening does make sense. Like sharpening your weapon for the thing. I don't think it should. I don't think it wiped when you died, but like, there's no reason not to have that. Like the weapon oils and or enchants and or like grindstones, whatever. I think those were fine. Armor kit didn't make a lot of sense, but on that, I had no issues with that at all. The armor kit was unnecessary. It was extra and mandatory, but like the weapon stuff, I think was pretty good touch.
Step back and see what the sum total of that experience is. I think a lot of those examples that you gave were things that we did to make blacksmiths and other workers frankly feel more relevant. Feel like they had something that, other than the legendary crafting templates, they could sell that was part of the economy. Dragonflight is solving that problem on 5 other levels. So a world where you need to apply 5 or 6 things, it makes each one of them less meaningful, and also just the general economic burden of like doing runs, doing the content probably gets to be higher than we want it to be.
Okay, so that's it for Raid. I just have a few more questions about Mythic Plus.
Sure.
So the Mythic Plus system in Dragonflight, kind of getting a sneak peek of it in Season 4, so I think it'll actually, probably be a lot better now that you've had a run at retuning some old raids, which has been really nice. The only thing that I could kind of think of as a potential downside is that what happens if, in Season 1, you run into one of your new Dragonflight dungeons that is just extremely good. It is like the key that people want to run, not because it's easy at a time, it's just like this key is so very fun. You can think of a lot of people have different opinions of these, but like what that would be. It may sadden Mythic Plus players that they have an amazing dungeon, they don't get to play it for a long time. So basically what I'm asking is, what's the balance of good versus new? And if anything, you might not be able to speak on this because kind of in the future, but like, do you have any plans for Season 3 or 4 of Mythic Plus? As at that point, you've kind of shown what you'll do in Season 1 and 2, right? You'll have 4 Dragonflight and 4 returning, maybe to bring back some old favorites.
Yes, I think we definitely have room to revisit, maybe tweak or update, or just revisit as they were if everyone loves them, a dungeon later on in the season. I think Season 2 is almost certainly going to be the other 4 Dragonflight dungeons plus 4 other legacy ones. But beyond that, I think...
Yeah, that's what I talked about earlier when they were talking about Raid, and I thought they were talking about the dungeons that they remake, so there's not much I can add here.
One thing the structure does is also gives more room for us to potentially add all new dungeons over the course of an expansion. Something we would like to get back to doing more of. I think back in Legion, when we last did this, one of the quick challenges that we ran into was integrating a brand new dungeon into a pool of dungeons that the community had already mastered. Like when Cathedral Mythic Plus rolled out,
this is such a good point.
That was a super dead key for a long time, even more so
than
Fuck Cathedral.
And like it wasn't actually like
Cathedral and Seat were just like such badly designed, like poorly designed dungeons. It was crazy to the point where like the last boss had a 90% nerf. Like that's fucked up on one of his abilities.
The challenge is, it wasn't that they were, in some cases they were actually harder, but like beyond that, it wasn't that they were that much harder. It's that you were comparing a dungeon the community had 1 week of knowledge of to a dungeon that had been running, for over a year.
The learning a Mythic Plus dungeon doesn't take that long, and still, from the beginning of Cohen till the last week of Legion, no one really liked the dungeon. Yeah, they nerfed the fuck out of it and made it more accessible and stuff like that. Still, no one liked that dungeon though. Same with like getting Karazhan, which one was? I feel like it was Upper Kara. No one really wanted to do Upper Kara on Tyrannical. It was just like fucking cancer. Right? You just didn't want to do it. Even though the chess boss was cool, I think. Coin was shit. Seat, again, Seat was the shortest lived dungeon, but at the same time it was long enough and still people didn't like it, right? Just the dungeon philosophy on the latest dungeons that they released was just shit, which is, by the way, Cohen and Seat. are the last 2 dungeons that they added, and they were shit. And the worst part is BFA took those 2 dungeons as an example for their for most of the dungeon designs, which was really fucking bad.
But treating them equally in terms of rewards.
It wasn't. The thing is, it wasn't even the bosses that was the problem in Cohen and Seat. It was literally just the trash was just so fucking cancer to deal with. That's just like, and also easily to overpull stuff, right? So it's like in Seat you could overpull like crazy. In Cohen you can overpull like crazy by mistake, right? It's like you go into the room with before the spider mini boss. Like she wasn't a spider, she was like a female dreadlord or whatever. No, she was pretty much like half spider, half woman. I don't know what she was, but it's like that one with the 2 big spiders that show up at some point. It's like it just was a shitty design overall, and it's the trash. It's not the bosses.
What challenge they're supposed to offer. When we have all new pools, that's not an issue anymore. So I think as we look towards the later seasons, if there's new dungeons introduced, not actually goes there, you definitely can revisit any
batteries dying
while continuing to rotate through cool legacy dungeons.
Excellent. That is a perfect answer. And then also just a question about
I mean, it answers,
so this is brought up a lot, but I just kind of want to maybe phrase it in a little bit different way. So with Mythic Plus becoming more of an endgame avenue for people, is there a potential to add higher level loot acquisition for people who are doing top world level keys specifically? So like obviously rating and PvP both get functionally higher eye level, but a lot of people exclusively Mythic Plus. Basically, is there a Mythic Plus key level that exists where it is kind of the same thing as killing maybe the last 2 bosses on Mythic, even though obviously you don't have to, you know, find 20 people to raid with, and then one is spammable for loot and one of them is a weekly lockout, all of that included. Just have you guys had any more thoughts on that?
Okay. Before he answers that, I don't think there should be a Mythic Plus difficulty where it rivals a Mythic raid boss. What I think should be is when you're doing, let's say, how they use the Mythic Plus 20s to give you the portals to the Mythic Plus dungeons. I think they should just have Mythic Plus 15 gives you like the season reward, whatever, but like Mythic Plus 20s gives you like some cool ass fucking Mog, mount, whatever. Like make it cosmetic. You don't need more gear. I don't think like you need more gear to do a Mythic Plus 20. I think if you can do Mythic Plus 15s and get all the gear from there, you can do Mythic Plus 20 pretty much on every class and every spec. If you want to do the 25s and shit, yeah, that's go for it. But like 20s, every class, pretty much every spec can do. It's not optimal, but you can. And just give some really, really cool cosmetics.
I think there is a key level that exists. It's definitely a different key level for Lower Karazhan than Workshop. But
would be fun if they give tokens as a reward at some point, bro. Like if you clear Mythic Plus 25s, like if you clear all 25s this week, once a month you can get a WoW token. That would be fucked up. So if you're a really good player, you can play for free.
You know, that's one of the challenges too.
Or make gold, whatever.
The spammability of it definitely is a factor. That's something we've grappled with when it comes to Mythic Plus loot since its introduction back in Legion. You know, because of how varied dungeon pools are, because of just the social factors of if someone's running a dungeon on a Saturday, we don't want people feeling like, well, I'm already locked for the week or I've already maxed out loot for the week, so I don't want to run it with you. That's led us to every dungeon run gives you some loot, but of course balancing that against weekly throttled systems like, you know, just raids and PvP means that if it's too rewarding, we just completely killed raiding. And I would argue that
I don't think Mythic Plus 15 should be more difficult than they are. Most people already are not doing them.
You know, one of the problems for not Mythic guilds so much, but normal and heroic guilds right now, is the tension between raid rewards and Mythic Plus rewards.
Yep.
If you're in a group progressing through heroic over the course of the season,
you need to do Mythic Plus 15s.
Running 15s outside of raid time, you don't really need that raid loot anymore. And that increasingly causes division within the group.
It's like 3 item level difference. And the vault, it gives you Mythic raid loot, so it doesn't even matter.
The people who are doing Mythic Plus and people who aren't, none of that is great. So anyway, all of that said, the direction I think we'd like to move in.
Mythic Plus sets. Please say Mythic Plus tier sets and raid sets. Just do that. Solve this problem so easily. Mythic Plus sets work in Mythic Plus. They're better for Mythic Plus. You can use them in raid, but like in the raid you can get a tier set, like not tier, but like a set for that gives you bonuses for raid, and that's it. Like it's not such a complicated problem.
But I don't have specific changes to announce. Is on the one hand actually trying to, between tuning and rewards, bring that baseline down a little bit, or at least bring the baseline challenge up a little bit, so that there's more of more parity between raid, dungeon, PvP rewards.
No. It will always, like, unless you make it insanely hard to do, Mythic Plus will always be easy. Mythic Plus 15 is technically easier to do than a normal raid and gives better loot. That's how fucked up it is. Not because the raids are hard, because the time investment is hard.
In that space, but at the same time, find ways to let Mythic Plus players reach the top of the mountain. Like whether it's, yeah, I don't know, whether there's some level that you clear in your Great Vault that lets you get Mythic end boss quality loot or whatever else.
I don't think that's
let's make it
necessary.
equal in that sense, but
That's not necessary.
Yeah, definitely. There's also, I think this season kind of showcased what.
As much as I love loot, it's so unnecessary. The sets solve the problem so much easier. Make the sets, make it so you perform better in Mythic Plus, and that's it. Like, increase movement speed when killing mobs. Like, even just utility stuff for Mythic Plus. Regenerate HP after killing X amount of monsters. Every time you kill 5 monsters, you get like 500% HP regeneration, right? Increase your damage by 10% after killing a mob, It's not going to work in a raid because you're not killing that mobs that often. You can have like the Mythic Plus gear, not even just work only in Mythic Plus, it can work in the raid, but it's like you're not killing that many monsters. Unless like it's a boss with a lot of monsters, then it's like, figure it out. But yeah, I feel like they're overcomplicating it, man. Just specific sets for specific content. World content, you have sets. PvP, you already have sets. Tier sets can work in raid. Mythic Plus sets, just make them work in Mythic Plus. I mean, I don't think it's, put the utility that helps you in Mythic Plus on the Mythic Plus sets. Put the utility that helps you in raids on the raid sets. Like, I mean, if there's only one target next to you, you deal X more damage. I don't know, that won't work in Mythic Pluses. Like, that will work in Mythic Plus bosses, but like, you can't change gear in Mythic Pluses, so it's like, it's up to you which set you want to use.
What can happen to the heroic raid difficulty by having Mythic Plus available for, like, you uncap Valor, for example, right? So if you just went hard enough and you farmed literally +2s and enough Valor, like anyone can do them, yep. You can get full 298 gear and you will not want any single drop out of heroic basically except for the last boss. So there's like
the whole like thing with like getting upgrading with Valor. I like it, but I don't like is you shouldn't be able to upgrade past a certain point unless you clear that content. So for example, if you want to upgrade to like Mythic Plus 10 gear, you should have cleared Mythic Plus 10 or like have a certain IO score that dictates that you can, right? So it's like you're gonna have IO score brackets, and like unless you are within the bracket, you can't upgrade past a certain point. Since they already implement IO score into the game anyways, you might as well use it.
Like there's a level there balancing where like baseline Mythic Plus. Okay, I haven't thought of it like that before. Thank you.
But at the high end, like I think there's absolutely every bit as much skill that goes into pushing really, really high keys. We should be rewarding that equally. We just have to find a way to do it.
No, there's a lot less skill. Well, I mean, there's a good chunk of skill regardless, but it's like if you can do a Mythic Plus 20, you can also do a Mythic boss. The problem is you have less people to screw you over in a Mythic Plus than you do in a raid. Like having a variable of 20 players versus a variable of 5 players, the risk of screw up is much bigger with the 20 players. It is what it is.
Cool. All right. Well, that's
also takes longer and gets you tired.
I do have a few more questions about like class trees and dragon writing. Sure. With how fun and successful dragon writing, for the few of us who've been able to actually try it yet, hopefully soon a lot more people get it in their hands. It is unbelievable. I think it like fully transcends flying. In fact, it's so good that I feel like just flying normally just feels bad because of how good the system is. Are there any thoughts or plans in the future to allow dragon writing in the open world?
I mean, the future, like immediately, just allow it in the open world. Let's be real. If you're flying from Undercity to, let's say, Stranglethorn, you won't be able to, well, I mean, you might be able to use dragon riding, but like you can just auto fly and go to the washroom for like 2 minutes before, it's like, it's not, I don't see a reason that it would replace it if you're playing passively. If you're playing actively, then sure, replace it. But if you're playing actively, then you're wasting less time flying from one place to the other. Again, I just make it worldwide, like just make it available everywhere. Like, it's so dumb that, and we all know they're gonna do it. There's no reason not to.
Actually, some race content and old zone stuff like that.
That's certainly one of those things we started talking about pretty quickly once initial impressions came in. I think we built the system focused on Dragon Isles so that we really didn't have as many of the guardrails in designing it that we might have had if we were building it from day one as an evergreen game-wide system. A challenge here is also, not...
Okay, adding it to all mount types, I don't agree with. Right, first of all, probably will not be easy, like engineering-wise. Second of all, why? Like, there's really no even reason for them to do that for every mount type.
The specific mounts, the Dragon Ride, we built to support Dragon Riding. We want to be very mindful of preserving players' investment, and it's the usefulness of the hundreds of mounts that many people have collected. They've spent years farming up. If suddenly those mounts are consigned to the dust heap because they can't do all the cool Dragon Riding stuff, that feels like a problem.
most people have those mounts for collective reasons. They are not mounting them. Like, let's be real. Most people mount one or two of the same mount year round, and like, it's like no one would care. Absolutely no one would care if my invincible can't do dragon riding. If I'm trying to go from one place to the other as fast as possible, I don't give a shit which mount I'm using. I'm using the fastest one I can. Like, so doesn't matter.
All that said, like, yeah, when we introduce any one of these features, our hope is that it's awesome enough that people don't want to say goodbye to it, but we want to carry it forward, for the rest of the game's future.
Yeah,
so far this is looking to be landing in that space, so we're very happy about that.
Yeah,
recognize that
make it happen.
Dragon Flight is behind us when we're leaving the Dragon Isles. People are not going to feel great about going back to their old, just, floating at a static speed in the sky mounts, and so we want to have a solution when we get there.
All right, cool.
No, before you get there, just make it worldwide, man. Like, it doesn't matter. The other thing is you can add race points literally all over the world. You can add race points across ICC. That would be fucking fun. In Shalazar Basin, right? In BFA zones. You can add dragon racing in literally every fucking zone if you want to. You don't have to do it right away, but it's like you can easily. So right now it's like they have the dragon racing stuff, dragon racing stuff in Dragonflight, right? I guess it's a queuable thing, and it's like you compete against other people. Make more arenas around the world. There's no reason not to.
Let's see. I have two other ones. I'm trying to like kind of combine them, maybe come up with something that is a little better. So far the class trees have been excellent. The best ones give you things you haven't had before. They give you choice. Being able.
Which ones are these?
Well, maybe not even adding things you're getting, but necessarily just dropping things you don't maybe need for a specific encounter to give you a passive or another thing that will make you more powerful in what you're doing. This has been achieved through most of the specs in the game, but the feedback has been a little varied. So we've had, some specs get feedback every Friday for this entire patch so far with great changes. There's been other classes that didn't have posts for a month, but then just got this massive dump of information that was clearly being worked on the whole time with excellent changes, speaking about DK specifically. And then some other classes have had less updates. Basically, just asking, like, can there be a more standardized level of feedback between all the classes, and how is that working for you guys?
Druids and priests, we hear you. We're going to have information soon. Apologies for the silence. I know, you deserve better and you rightly expect better. Ideally, yes, we would have had, just more even-handed communication across the board. The challenge is, it's, I know billion-dollar company and all, but at the end of the day, it's also a number of humans who can all just fit in one room together who are handling both the class design side of it and the community communication side of it. And life happens. That results in, gaps along the way. Sometimes one developer is working on a couple of classes and has one done. They need to get the other one done because understandably players of that class are impatient, but that means in turn that they're less focused on the first one for now and are going to get back to it. And so it's stuff like that. I know sometimes it can be helpful.
Look at that cute dog. I agree with him. I mean, it's not like you have one person per class. Also, like, you actually want a team to work on all of the classes to balance them out properly. But the other thing is, like, you can't work on them simultaneously. It's more like you make one class, this is the standard power level we want, and we want to adjust everyone approximately to that power level. You're not going to go through all of them at once. Obviously, it's going to take time. Yeah, some classes are just, it's not that they're neglected, but they're like further down the list of the to-do list. But it does feel bad. I mean, let's be real. Paladin felt like, well, at least Red, the prot felt okay, I think. Holy was just not even done yet when I checked. It is done now, but like when I reviewed it, I didn't review Holy yet. But Red was like, it clearly seemed like it was done in a rush and like completely zero thought put into it. You have one new talent that can replace Wake of Ashes, which like you would never use anyway, so I don't know what that's about, but yeah.
Just to hear from us that, we don't have anything right now. We're working on it. We're going to have news for you in a couple of weeks, as opposed to just radio silence. And I think we all need to collectively work to get better at ever having the radio silence situation going on. People are just waiting for news.
Excellent. Okay.
Oh, God. I just sneezed, and my abs are sore from the workout. Oh, fuck.
I think I have time for one more question. So, first of all, that's excellent. I don't even know if I need to enter the question. The question isn't even that good. I just want to point out that you guys have the right idea with class trees. The ones being done at their best, and you've seen over time the ones that were a bit more problematic have obviously been a deep amount of collaboration there, and they have seen the things that work in other trees and moved on to others. So far, I think the fact that some of them at their very best show an unbelievable form of content, I think all of us are just really happy.
Mage and Warrior. I'm assuming that's all he's talking about. I think DK probably is decent too because he keeps saying DK, but like he clearly doesn't play Paladin. Paladin is like in such a shitty spot to the point where like, so there was this whole thing where like Paladins were like why we're quitting. Like there was the fuck, what was it? Was on Asmongold's stream. It was like 5 different paladins, like McConnell, Savix, and like 3 others. I don't know. Like I think the guy who's in charge of the paladin Discord and shit like that, and they were all unhappy with paladin, like the the paladin roundtable, whatever it was called. They were really unhappy with paladin, and they are not very happy with red paladin right now either. So do something about that.
See it and just hope that all the classes kind of end up turning around with the same. Because I know it's going to be a long road, right? Because you're just now, it seems with post, you're getting into the tuning section, right? Where like now that you've added a bunch of new capstones, you're going to need to make sure that they all kind of make sense. They have some of them were capstone nodes before. They need to really compete with each other. So are you guys ready to just talk about that process?
Yeah, tuning and iteration, right? I mean, that's going to mean replacing some talents, redesigning some things that just aren't working. But we obviously need to get the broad foundations out there. Looking forward to raid testing, Mythic Plus, endgame, seeing people actually using these builds in different situations, and moving beyond theory crafting to playing with them. And that's the only thing that's ahead of us. And frankly, that's actually a little bit of a relief. Like at this point in Shadowlands, we still had 4 different systems to implement. It was like, cool, we got these things done. Now let's finish making conduits and Torghast powers. Here, okay, we have our first pass of the talent trees done. 100% of the team's time is going to be focused on listening, responding, iterating, and then doing.
First of all, amen to that. That they have so much more time to just, if talents is the last thing that they need to do, like they're just like can just work fully on talents and not the systems. That's a good thing. I cannot believe that he just admitted that in Shadowlands the systems were the last thing that they did, even though they kept saying how much they're gonna balance it and stuff. It's like, bro, it really shows like how bad Shadowlands was designed. It's fucked up, man.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for your time.
I have one super quick question for you. I just want to see this as a question for you, for the community.
Okay.
How do you guys feel about simultaneous normal, heroic, mythic release as a thing in, let's say, hypothetical future tiers?
I think, for me personally, I think, okay, so I haven't had any time to think about this, but something that I think is an issue is like one thing you guys have done some things to mitigate in the past is you've like had to reduce what crazy things we would do during heroic when like Mythic first comes out. But the reality is that's because we have an entire week to do degenerate things. If Mythic is out, that really solves a lot of the decision making. You'd be doing a lot of things when Mythic is out, but I mean that is a massive source of information. I don't know. That's very overwhelming. I would need to figure that out.
Yeah,
but
and to be clear, I'm super not genuinely not announcing anything there.
Yeah,
we're just trying to figure out. I mean, yeah, there's holidays coming up. There's stuff going on. We want to think through how our raid rollout is going to work for the start of Dragonflight, and community feedback always helps.
I think it'd be. I'm not positive, but I think it would be worth a shot, especially with like the potential timing. So I think I'm so much fun.
I love how crazy the release date confirmed around holiday. I mean, everyone knows it's going to be near Christmas. Everyone knows it's going to be released this year, and the raids would be somewhere around Christmas, right? Like if it's November, usually raids release within a month, approximately after a month. Maybe a few weeks after the expansion release. So like, yeah, I mean, everyone knows it's going to be next to Christmas. Even if they release in early December, then the raids are right after Christmas.
I'm almost positive that it's a good thing, but I would need to like actually sit down.
I think it is a good thing. Overall, I think it's a good thing, but also not a good thing. So I think it's a good thing because it would help these guys, like these guys, right? The world first raiders. It would reduce their split runs. However, it could also put pressure on them as well at the same time to like max out before the raid is released. I mean, actually no, they're already maxing out regardless. Like the world, they probably can't max out any more than they already are, right? I don't think it's overall good for the community, especially if they have a steady release schedule. I feel like it would take time away from mythic raiders who are like on the like barely get the cutting edge. I think it will reduce their time to get cutting edge, though it might give them an extra week. It depends how like the releases happen. So
I don't actually think about it. So thank you for that. That's very cool. And
I feel like
so
there's more positive than negative, though.
I love hearing you talk about WoW. I'm very passionate about it, and very clearly you are too. So thank you for that.
I feel like overall it would be positive, but I don't know. It's like I come from the standard of like Mythic Raid being released a week or 2 weeks after Heroic, so I don't know. I feel like overall it is a net positive to release them at the same time. People who are Mythic Raiders can do their Heroic run, get probably like 10 bosses out of 12, let's say, done. 11, 12 are too hard, and they go and they start Mythic on the first week, just doing the first 3 bosses, or like a week earlier and just working on the first few bosses to get even more gear. I feel like overall it is a net positive, but we'll see.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, thank you very much, and look forward to doing it again.
All right, thanks, man.
Cool. Right. Yeah, awesome video. Okay, people are happy about the warlock changes, I guess, but it is what it is. Yeah, anyways, so that's the video. Don't have too much to say about that. The biggest problem is still the loot. I think they're overthinking how Mythic Plus and rating should work. Again, I think sets for each type of content is just so much easier for them to do than try to balance out gearing between the two. Yeah, like, you know, and the other thing is, like, I think they need to remove the raid ID from Mythic, at least, if not right away, remove it like halfway through the raid tier. You know how like they had they're doing the whole like once 100 horde players and 100 alliance players clear the get cutting edge, you can do it cross faction stuff like that. I know they're nerfing it or removing it completely, but I feel like raid ID should also be gone with when you allow cross faction and cross realm parties. Just remove the raid ID at some point. But yeah, other than that, yep, that's the video. Again, overall good interview. He is being very nice to Ian, and again, he's respectful of Ian, which is fine, I guess. Like, I don't think anyone should be like, you know, you're not gonna get more interviews with them if you're being super rude. But I feel like the questions were not. Well, I guess it's an interview. Like, I preferred the Ian Preach conversation, because I can't call it an interview. It was literally a conversation about stuff in Shadowlands, and like you could see the disagreement from Preach about the WoW philosophy. Here it's more like I ask a question, this is the answer, and it's cool, thank you, and not so much disagree with it. So that, I guess that's the difference in an interview and a conversation. But yeah, I much preferred the conversation type rather than an interview, because like you can ask hard questions, he doesn't even really have to answer them, kind of dodge the answer, like give you like an arbitrary answer, and all you can do is like say thank you and move on. So yeah, I just don't like these interviews overall too much, because you get answers but you don't get like it's not like you can make them understand the problem, right? It's like you hope they understand the problem, but you can't like actually like argue with them about a topic, right? So it is what it is. Anyways, thank you, that's the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Oh wait,